Hello, welcome back to the Operation Amigos podcast and our new series, Why Did They Come? Today, our guest is Delia Ruiz, who is a good friend of mine. We got to work together on the Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival, and that was a lot of fun. Delia is still working with them, which is awesome, and there's going to be an amazing new year. So, Delia, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Megan, for having me. I'm so excited just to join you in another venture because we get to work together. So
I
that's always been so much
know.
fun.
It's the best. It was so sad to be like, oh, there's people I'm not going to see regularly anymore. And so you were at the top of my list for sure, just to get to see your face.
Well, the good thing about we're all in socials now, and I feel like that's the great thing that we get to stay in touch and I get to
Yeah.
see your journey online as well.
Okay, I want to talk about your journey a little bit. Delia Ruiz is a first-generation Latina author from San Antonio, Texas. Her published works include the 123 Baila board book series, Ways Papi Says I Love You, which is right behind you, and it's beautiful. I love this book. Moon Chef, and the International Latino Book Award-winning story Rocky's Pandero Beat. Did I say that right? Awesome. Delia enjoys creating teacher materials under her teacher store Aventuras en ESL. Aventuras en ESL is also her social media platform used to showcase diverse books, especially Latinx book picks. She currently resides in Puerto Rico with her husband, toddler, and pug. Delia hopes to inspire the next generation of writers who also come from immigrant households. I love, love, love all of that. And I love your books. You have done some just really fun things. So what else do you want us to know about you, Delia?
Yeah, I feel like on top of all those book related things, I think one of my main jobs and one of the jobs I really enjoy is being a mom. And so I'm really in my mom life, doing all the things with my toddler. But all these jobs intertwine and they keep me grounded in the book world. So all the jobs that I'm currently doing in freelance and in writing and then being a mom, I'm constantly reading. And so I think that's what all
I
my
love
jobs have
that.
in common. And it's just something that I enjoy to do. So yeah, I think all those roles kind of define who I am.
I love it. It was so fun to be on meetings with you when you first had your baby and you'd be holding him and I just thought this is so great. It's so great to see um, someone who is doing all the things. You know, you're being the mom and you are also writing and putting yourself out there and it's all important. It's all a part of who you are, which I love.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I saw something recently that said like your kids deserve to see you going after your dreams as well. So I never wanted to pause that. I was like, we're gonna make it work, whether that's writing in between nap times or anything. And I'm glad that
Yeah.
it's worked out and we have a good routine with that.
I love that. It's true. They deserve to see you going after your dreams and achieving them so that they know that they can as well one day
That's
achieve their
right.
dreams. That's the best. I love it. What do you think is the most exciting thing that has happened up till now that you're excited for your kids to know about you?
Yeah, I think it one of the first things that I did early on was like I've always read to my child, and so now he's picking up books, but he doesn't know that I write them. And so for me, it's a happy moment when he asks to read a repetitive book that I wrote. And so I
Mm-hmm.
I always like model like this is, the title and I read aloud the author's name, but he has no idea like who is that
Oh my
author?
gosh.
Is that person? But
When
it's
he
like
starts to understand, that's going to be the best.
yeah. So I think those happy moments is like when he picks up the books that I've written and he asks like, I want to read this one again. And I'm like, yes, okay. So
Oh,
that's
that's so
exciting.
fun. That's the best. And then, when he starts going to school and if he sees your books at school or like they start reading your books or, I think that would be the coolest thing for a kid to tell their friends. This is my mommy's book,
Yeah.
she
I'll
wrote
see
this book.
when that connection happens. Right now I just read aloud who's the author illustrator and we keep reading. We'll see.
That's great. Okay, so one of the big things we're talking about today is our family histories. And I just want to know in general, do you think it's important for us to know where we came from, and why? Why do you think it's important for each of us to know, where we came from and the people who came before us?
Yeah, well, for me especially, it's super important to know where I came from because that kind of grounds my identity and my roots. And oftentimes when we're trying to figure out who are we and, why are we living in this place and who came before us, um, understanding who came before us from our family and from that history, at least for me, it allowed me to understand and have a deeper appreciation for my family and their challenges, and also make space for people that are following, for me, especially that first gen path moving forward. So I got to do a lot of that when I was a teacher, and that allowed me to have that creativity and just passion to guide students forward that were also coming from immigrant backgrounds. But that was because I understood where my family came from, that I understood the struggles, I understood what it took to get me to that point. And then it really defined my identity and who I was. So a lot of the work that I continue to do now, more of it in my writing world, I try to go back to those roots. And I find that a lot of students, and even parents and educators can relate to some of these things. So yeah, I definitely think it's super important because at least for me, it's guiding me forward to know where my rich family
Yeah.
background came from.
I love that, and I bet those students and parents were so encouraged when they were from similar backgrounds as yours, and they were probably so encouraged to have a teacher who identified with that and that understood what that was like. I think that was probably, like a relief, to them probably.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially is I didn't grow up with a Latino or Latina teacher in my life. I can think of one very early on, and she was a teacher's aide, and still she's my teacher. But I think now I'm so happy to know that there's so many educators that look like their students, and that students are seeing those connections, and then going back, people are seeing those connections sometimes even in the books that they read in the classrooms now that oftentimes we didn't get to have in some of the early years.
So, Delia, who were the first people to come to the United States in
Yeah,
your family, either on both sides or on one side?
yeah. So in my family, my dad immigrated first, and he came over for a job. And so during that time, my sister, my mom, and I, we were living in Mexico. And so we would go these long periods without seeing my dad because he was working in field type jobs and then in construction type jobs. So it wasn't until these jobs ended or there was a break, then he would come back to Mexico and come back and visit us. And so for a while, it was like that. It was just long periods of time. We were mainly with my mom and went to school in Mexico and then got to see my dad and then it would return. So it wasn't until later on that there was more of a permanent position. I believe my dad heard from my uncles, look, there's poultry plants opening up here in Alabama, like come over. And I think that was when he decided, like, I'm bringing my whole family over. So by then I was around age 6. But yeah, for a while it was like that. And so he
Wow.
came over first. And then before my mom had me, she had visited as well. And then we all came over at once, and that was back around 1998, if I'm correct.
Wow. So you yourself immigrated here. You are
I
an
was
immigrant, Delia.
I was actually the only one born in San Antonio, Texas. So my mom had
Oh,
me in
you
San Antonio,
were?
Texas, and we only lived there maybe a year, and then we went back to Mexico, and then my mom had my sister in Mexico. So
Okay.
I lived very little in San Antonio. I have family there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like most of my life really where I spent my childhood was mainly in Mexico. And then most of my life was
Wow.
actually in Alabama.
Wow. So what part of Mexico did you live in?
Yeah, so we live in San Luis Potosí, so about 4 hours north of the capital. But it's very in the middle. Like we're not near a coastline, anything. It's a very just dry area, but it's those areas that when you grow up, it's those childhood memories that make it just extra special.
Do you get to visit?
Yes, I grew up visiting Mexico every summer, every single since I can remember when I was elementary school up to high school. I went every single summer, and I think the last time I went was right before COVID. So sadly
Okay.
I haven't gone in a little bit, but yeah, I do get to go back often, and it's so nice to see how it's changed. And also go back and visit my extended family and grandparents over there.
I love that. I grew up the same way, going back to Mexico every year. Usually it was Christmas. Summer was
Yeah.
so hot
Yes.
there. And so we would usually go around Christmas time or sometimes in the fall. And yeah, it was just such good memories of being able to see family there and stay connected, and so I'm glad that you were able to. I know that there's a lot of people who come here who immigrate and then can't they're not able to go back and see their family members afterwards, so I'm glad you were able to stay connected.
Yeah, no, that's true that you say that because on my dad's side, they have a residency and they're able to come here, and I can see them in the middle of the year. They choose to visit, but on my mother's side, they can't, and so we go
Oh,
these years without seeing my grandparents on that side. So for me, it's extra special when I get to go home and visit that side of the family. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, it's those things that are real, that sometimes those can come and sometimes you can't go back and visit as often as you'd like to.
right, and I'm so grateful for, modern technology that we have now, where we can actually see their faces, with the FaceTiming and different things, which is so nice. But for those who are not able to go back and forth, that can be really difficult. What were some of the reasons that your dad decided to come up and work seasonally? Because I know that must not be an easy thing for him to leave his family for probably months at a time and come up here to work and have to go back and forth. But what were some of the reasons that he did that?
Yeah, so my family comes from a big farming type family on both sides, mom and dad. And my dad was helping my grandfather with um, la cosecha, all the farming that happens in the ranch, but it just wasn't selling enough. And so when at that point, my sister came into the picture, and now he had two kids to take care of. And it just got to the point like this is not sustainable. Like maybe my mom and dad could make it out there, but now with two kids in the picture, it was like, okay, we need another source of income and we need to work. And that took him up over the border and landed him in Texas to mainly work out here. So yeah, a lot of it was the opportunities in Mexico weren't there, and the opportunities in the U.S. were here. And so that did mean that sacrifice of like, okay, I'm going to step away from the family to work. Um, and he did that for a couple of years until ultimately we just all moved over and made Alabama home for a while.
Wow, Alabama, that's cool. My grandparents on my mom's side, they lived in Alabama for many years in Huntsville. Where did you guys live?
Oh, I went to school in Huntsville, so
Oh,
very close.
really? That's so cool. That's
Yeah, so
that's
I
awesome.
that's where I went to school for college. I actually lived an hour south of Huntsville. That's where we grew up, elementary school, all of that. But yeah, I had no idea, when you're little, you're like, what is this new land? What is this that people are speaking? And yeah,
Yeah.
Alabama was home for over 20 years, I believe.
Oh my goodness, 20 years.
Yeah, I didn't move out of there until like my mid 20s. And yeah, so
Wow.
about 20 years since I stepped away and got to see more of like the other world.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced when you family got to Alabama and you were with your dad? I imagine it could have been, wonderful to be with him again, right? But you're in a different country where, you've been in a place where things are done in one way, and now you're somewhere else where things are done completely differently, and as you say, a different language. So what was that like for you when you first arrived there?
Yeah, so I remember still, we left Mexico in the back of my dad's camper truck. And so I remember they just put blankets and quilts back there, and we took this road trip from Mexico all the way to Alabama, and it was so long. And I just remember the scenery
Yeah.
constantly changing as we went through these new states. But it made me excited because I got to see a lot of green that I didn't normally see in my area of Mexico. And then arriving here, I think we all had the struggle of the language barrier. Like my dad knew very, very minimal English, and so I didn't know any of it. And I was afraid of like, well, I'm not going to understand these people. What do I do? And so the only thing that he taught me was, my house address and phone number. Like I didn't know how to say like my name is Delia or I need to go to the bathroom. Like no, like that wasn't. I would think like, don't you want to teach me these things? But no, he was like
They're
phone
pretty
number and
important.
address. Yeah, and he's like, if you ever get lost, just repeat these things in English. And he would quiz my sister and I. Like before went to school, it was like, what's your phone number? What's your address? And we would have to repeat it in English. And that was all the English I knew stepping into school. So it was kind of scary as a little kid of like, I don't know how to get around, but I can recite these things and someone will help me get home.
That must have been hard, but also he was pretty smart, like knowing where you are and where you need to be if you get lost. Those are super important things. So were there people at school that were able to help you when you got to school? That were there other kids that I remember having to translate for kids that immigrated from like
Yeah.
Venezuela. There was one family that came with a bunch of kids and none of them spoke English. And so I had to translate for them for a while well, the one that was in my class. And then, moving through the grades, several others. And so what was that like? Did you have someone like that was able to translate for you?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes teachers tend to assign like you to a buddy and things like that. And I know when I was a teacher, I would find like a student that I thought would be a really good friend and be like, oh, can you help them show them around? And so my kindergarten teacher did that for me. I just don't think the pairing was all that great because this girl did not want to help me and she did not like just want to translate. And so I did feel like I have to figure this out. Like, yes, I have this buddy, but she is not she's not cooperating over here. So
Oh,
that kind of
wow.
gave me a little bit more of a push, like I need to do this and I need to figure it out. And, kids are fast learners. Language learning happens quite rapidly in the early years. And so luckily I was able by the end of kindergarten, I had enough English where I could start to read a book and things like that. So I could get around. But I would say early on it, the couple of first weeks, I was like, no, I'm ready to go home. Like, mom and
Oh,
dad, this was
yeah.
cool, but okay, let's go
This was a
back.
nice try, but let's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So at what point did you feel like you started to buy into it? At what point did it start to feel, or did it ever start to feel natural and like maybe you wanted to stay?
Yeah, I feel like books were my happy place. I think the moment that I learned how to read in English, because I remember by first grade I was like hitting those accelerated reader points and certificates. So I got to reading really quick, and I think that became like my happy spot. Like, oh, I could check out books and I could enter these imaginary worlds all through books. And so I really like that because we didn't have access to books and those kind of resources back in Mexico. And so I was really enjoying that I was in this space where I was exploring all these new toys, and there was a playground outside, and there was books, and I think all that stuff, I was finding school enjoyable at that point. And I was like, this is my new home now.
So going back to something you just said, you didn't have access to books when you were in Mexico. So as far as like a library, a school library, or a community library, that wasn't a thing where you lived?
No, it wasn't. So we lived in a very rural area of Mexico. I believe they got Wi-Fi maybe 5 years ago, and
Oh.
and this is in present day, it was not that long ago. And even the phone system, I can remember when they barely got phones, and maybe I was in school. But it was such a rural area that you walked everywhere, and school only existed, I believe, up to middle school. So if you even wanted to attend high school there, you had to drive 30 minutes away. And so no, there was no library, there was no community anything. The only book that I got to see was maybe my parents' Bible, and my mom would try reading it, but as a little kid, that just goes over my head. I was like, that was too much
Yeah,
comprehension
that's a
for
little
a little
much.
kid.
It wasn't a Bible for children,
No, and so
illustrated
like
Bible for children.
it just wasn't. And they would quiz me, and then I was like, I wasn't enjoying reading anymore, just hearing stories because I would get quizzed, and I was like, this is too difficult. I don't know these words. There's no pictures. It wasn't fun. But yeah, I wish that those resources existed, and they just didn't at that point.
Yeah, I think we take for granted, me growing up here and going to a library and having books at school, as a little kid. I think to myself, I probably thought, oh yeah, everybody has libraries and everybody has access to books. There are kids out there who they don't get to just go to a library. They don't get to have books at their schools. So I'm wondering, did that form kind of the basis for your later work, like Aventuras and ESL, and then your work with the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival? How much of that, your desire to do those things went back to that experience?
Yeah, well, I think because I really enjoyed reading at such a young age, there's a correlation with reading and writing, and so I loved writing as well. And I would fill up all these journals with silly little rhyming stories or just any kind of things. Um, and so I think both of those things together led into a passion of like I really like reading and writing. But I think early on, because that's not really offered as a career path, at least, when they talk to you in high school, it's like these are the careers you
Yeah.
go into. Like no one mentions um, the art fields as much, or even just writing or being an author. So I didn't even know that was an option. So I think the closest thing that I could think of was like maybe I want to be a teacher because I can write with students and I can create books with them. And so that's what led me to that path. And I think afterwards I realized I have this passion for it. So let me continue reading and writing and step into work fields where this continues to be something that I enjoy to do.
Something that you said, about career paths being offered to you, that's something that resonates with me with my dad as well because he had to go into a field that it was labor, using your hands. Um, I don't think that's something he ever could have dreamed of as a career, something in the arts would not have sustained our family at that
Yeah.
point. So, um, how do you think that the work that you've done now, the foundation that your dad laid for you and the foundation that you've laid for your children, how is that going to make their futures look a little different from what yours and your families before you looked like?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like just pride and happiness when you get to see yourself on a page. And in the early years, even the elementary teachers that I had that read to me, it was like animal books, and it was like books about just different things that had nothing to do with my culture. None of the kids in the pages look like me. So even though I like these stories, I didn't feel like "Oh, I love this story or like this is speaking to me." And I think it wasn't until middle school when I had a teacher read Esperanza Rising, and I was like, "Oh, that's so similar, and I really like this story." And I had to wait that long. I had to wait all the way to middle school to see that. Whereas like now, having a child and I was a teacher, and so I got to read to students early on. They get to see themselves on pages earlier on, and I'm just remembering the happiness that I felt when I got to see myself, and that they can like experience this joy earlier on. And it's funny enough because like my dad didn't get to experience it until this year. He's like in his 60s,
Oh,
and so
wow.
like representation matters so much, and like you never know what who you're gonna touch, because there's still people out there that are barely like picking up books, even if they've been written so long ago, and they're finding themselves on these pages. So my hope is that kids and my child get to see and live and embrace that happiness early on through books. They don't have to wait that long now.
I love that. Okay, so with the festival, Delia, you got to help arrange a panel, an event with Pam Muñoz Ryan, who wrote Esperanza Rising. So what was that like for you, with, the meaning of that story to you in your life personally and what that meant to you? What was it like to arrange that event for her?
Yeah, so I work at the festival with in the programming manager role, so we get to book all the authors and special guests. And so for me, that's the exciting part because, like, oh my gosh, this is when we're gonna find out who our headliners are before we announce it to the world. And so when I found out that it was gonna be Pam, I was like super excited because they were celebrating, I believe, 25 years since the story came out.
Yep.
And so that was a story that impacted me and it was so important to me. And I was so glad that we were having her headline for the festival. So it was a super exciting moment. Definitely getting her on board and saying yes, and then announcing it to the world, like, guess who is headlining the festival? So it was an exciting moment.
So exciting. Oh my gosh, I bet for me, um, it was exciting just because I know who she is and I've loved Esperanza Rising and a lot of her other books, but I didn't have that kind of a personal connection like you did, like that being the first book where you saw yourself on the pages. So yeah, that must have been such an exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it's crazy enough because it's like in the middle grade category, right? And so I didn't I at this moment, I can't think of even a picture book. Like, what was my first actual illustrated picture book? Because I saw myself through her cover, but it wasn't like an illustrated format where you're like seeing each other through the page and everything like that. So
Yeah,
I'm glad now that kids get to have access to picture books where they're also
the
seeing themselves on the
visuals
cover.
of that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
lots of vision.
Yeah, I love that so much. Um, okay, so I know that sometimes immigrants face lots of hard things when they immigrate, when they come to a new country. I know that my dad did. Um, what are some of the hard things that your dad faced either when he came here on his own or when you came as a family? What are some of those hard things that he faced, maybe that you didn't know about in the moment, but maybe that you learned about later? And I'm asking this because sometimes hard things, they turn to our good, right? When we go through hard things, they turn to our good and they end up helping us. So do you have an instance or a story that you've heard your dad talk about, where that was the case, where something hard actually turned to your good?
Yeah, one of the stories that I remember is actually their journey to the United States. And this was before I was born, I think about a year or so before I was born. And I didn't ask them specifically until I was in high school. I knew that they came, but I didn't know details. I didn't know what that journey was like. And so when I was in high school, I asked them, like, how did you come over and what was the trip like? And how do you do that? Like you go into a place where you don't know the language and you're going on foot as well. And so they did explain to me that the route that they took to get to the border oftentimes was like through a bus. If you had enough for a bus ticket, you could arrive as close as you could to the border. But even from there, there's all the walking that happens and they would tell me how they like had to cross a river on a tire. And my dad was like, "Yeah,
Oh,
your mom didn't know how
wow.
to swim, and we had to hold on to the tire as we crossed." And so it was like hearing all of these moments of like how difficult that journey was just to get here. And this was early on before, they could come here and they had, a paper or whatever to get in, right? So they
Mhm.
came this way with the help of un coyote. But the
Yeah.
coyote, he would tell me, he's like, it wasn't good. Like they, they take a lot of your money and they give you some sort of route, but you're really on your own. And so I think hearing that journey was like surprising for me. I didn't know what it was like, um, it gave me a deeper appreciation of like, your parents really took a long route for you to have access to so many things. And I think that's what
Yes.
grounded me to realize like their trip is not going to go to waste. And I think that was my drive of like, okay, thank you for telling that. I'm now going to push my journey up here and I'm going to keep showing you and keep like telling you that your journey was worth it. But that also it gets tricky because as a first gen, oftentimes you're trying to prove to yourself, and at least for me, it was trying to prove to my parents of like, look, I'm really glad you did this, and I'm gonna keep showing you how much I can climb this bar. But ultimately for them, it was like, we just want to see you happy. And so it's kind of like relearning and rewiring in my system to like what you did and what you do is enough. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that they shared that with me because there was a lot of hardship in that journey.
Oh my goodness, that must have been terrifying. It must have been terrifying, and I have loved ones I know who have made the same journey in the same way, and I've always just I can't I'm grateful that I personally didn't have to go through that. Um, but wow, I love what you're saying that that kind of pushed you to say, I'm I'm going to make that journey. That journey was worth it. And I'm going to do all I can, while at the same time realizing that your parents just want to see you happy, and
Yeah.
that just you doing okay is enough for them, and you doing well and happy, that's enough for them, that you don't need to, go above and beyond. Although I think that what you're saying is very common for first generation. Um, I feel the same way. I want my dad's journey to not have been for nothing, even though his looked very different. He didn't have to come that way. I think he definitely had it um, easier. And I use the word easier, I think that for him it was difficult. But I think, yeah, wanting to do something to show our parents that we're doing something with the sacrifice they made that's definitely a feeling that I've felt. And I hope that your parents and I'm sure they do have this pride for what you do, and the fact that now you get to tell stories to kids like you, and you get to put them in the pages of your books, like the book right behind you about your puppy, right? Is that book based on him?
Yeah, it was. It was based on a lot of childhood memories that I had when he did come home to Mexico. And it was, okay, I have this small amount of time before he has to go back. And for him, it was his love was shown mainly through quality time. And so taking us on these truck rides across the ranch was like one of those happy memories. Just riding in the back, your hair's blowing, music's playing. It's funny because I had originally put the girl in the story in the back, and they're like, no, 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 she needs to be inside in a seatbelt. I was like, okay, she needs to be in a seatbelt. I was like, but the true
A
story,
generation where we just got
yeah,
tossed in the back, right? Like
exactly.
I've been writing a picture book about road tripping to Mexico, and the first person who read my book was like, okay, but actually, should there be seatbelts involved? And I was like, yeah,
No,
probably. Because yeah, we're
yeah,
from that generation, right? We just got tossed in the back of the trucks, and so I
exactly.
love
Hold
that.
on, and you go, yeah. So it's
I
funny because
love
I did
that.
have that. But when the edits and everything came out, they're like, we need to put her inside, and she needs to have a seatbelt on. I was like, okay, I respect that.
Okay, even though that's not like super authentic to the story, fine.
Right. So yeah, I think for that story specifically, it did have to do with the bond that I have with my dad and those happy memories. But then it's also integrating on like when you are writing, it's like, well, how can you make other people relate to it? Because yes, you want to tie in maybe a personal connection, but another family who reads the story, how will they connect to it? And so it was integrating all these love languages into one. And I found like multiple families could relate through one of those five areas of love expression. And so, yeah, it came all around,
That's
and I'm
beautiful.
glad that it's going to be out in the world really soon.
That's amazing. When's your date, your published date? When does it come out?
Yeah, so it comes out March 24th of this year.
Oh my gosh.
It's right around the
So
corner.
soon.
Yes.
Yay. That's awesome. Okay, so just a couple other things that I want to touch on before we end. The first one is, do you think that your family could have stayed in Mexico? And and why or why not? And also, what would your life look like right now if you had stayed? If your family had stayed there, what would it look like?
Yeah, I think that they would have been able to stay if it was just them two, but I don't know if they could have made it with two other kids. I'm thinking maybe with an asterisk, if we go eat with my at my grandparents' house and, you know, a lot of families, especially in Mexico, it's a collective society. Everyone kind of helps each other out. Um, so I think we would have been okay. It would just been we would have had minimal things. Like there's no extra money or funds for anything else. And I don't know if I would have been able to even go to the high school that's 30 minutes from there. I mean, we would need a vehicle, we would need people to take my sister and I. So I envision that life would be very, very different from the life that I have now. Um, and I don't know if I grew up over there, if I would want to do more and like be pushed to like come over here, or if I would want to settle and have more of a just a life with kind of similar to my mom's, just a life there and you start raising kids sooner
Yeah.
than what I waited for. But yeah, I would envision it would look very different from what
Very
it is.
different, yeah. I think you wouldn't be sitting in front of a published book,
I
with
don't
your
think,
name on it.
I don't think
That
so either.
probably would have be a dream that it was not within grasp if your family had stayed there, right?
I think so
And
too. Yeah. I don't think and sometimes not having access to those materials, sometimes I wouldn't have known, like, maybe I would have read some stories here and there, but I don't think I would have had as much access as I did going to schools here.
right. Yeah. Well, I personally am super grateful that your family made the decision they did to come here because I got to meet you because of that,
Yes.
and we got to work together. Um, and and I feel like the world, the world that of kids that get to read your books and benefit from them are going to be super grateful as well. Because of everything that you talked about, those experiences that you had, and how those were able to translate onto the pages of not just the books that you write, but also into the work that you have done with your organization and with the book festival. And I'm sure there's a lot more to come in the future, which I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, I hope so
Um,
too. That is my hope as well, that they get to have access to some of these stories earlier on and that, even parents start seeing themselves as well if they didn't have as much access like my parents did.
yeah, I love that. What do you hope that the future can look like for your children? I know that we have a lot of hard things going on right now in our country. But what do you hope that the future here can look like for your own children?
Yeah, so at the moment, I have a toddler and he's Puerto Rican and Mexican. So I am trying my best to raise him with both sides to feel happy and proud of who he is from both worlds. And so I think as most parents, we want to see our children happy. And I want my child to have all these opportunities that I didn't have early on. I know oftentimes, like when I was younger, I wanted to try out sports. I wanted to go to these things, and there was never access or time to take me to anything. And so I want to be that for my child now and take him to any auditions he might want to go to or anything out there. I don't know if I have like this particular goal of like I need your path to be education or I need it to be a certain way. I just think that sometimes when kids get to explore their interests early on and you can be that supportive guidance, you don't know where that path is going to take you. And so I'm willing to play that route and we'll go through an exploration phase. And hopefully he can be a role model and a great guide for someone down the line. Because for me, it's so important that my child learns his roots and his identity and never forgets where he came from, never forget that his grandparents came here and because of me, I had you and look at all the things that we were able to do and how can you give back at some point? So that would be my hope in the future and I will be guiding him as best as I can.
I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and I have one more question for you, and it's what I ask all of my guests at the end of the Operation Amigos podcast. And that is, how can someone be an amigo to someone else that they don't understand, that they might not understand, or someone who they haven't connected with? How can that person be an amigo to someone else?
Yeah, I think just by learning to be empathetic towards other people and their situations, oftentimes we hear those expressions of like, be kind, but and it's like, but how do you do that? And so, at least for me, I try to play the role of being more of a listener versus a talker sometimes, hearing people out, seeing what things I can relate to with someone. I know even like with technology now, there's so many apps and translation things that we can do when we do want to get to know somebody else and when we do want to help somebody, we can use tools like that too. And then if you are able to help, providing that help, but if you can't help, then providing a resource. I know oftentimes I get asked, it's like, well, how do you write a book? And I was like, I wish I could take you through step one through two. Like that would be a very long chat. But oftentimes when I don't have that time, I know that I can provide a resource. Like this is at least where you start, or check out these videos. This is how you learn. So I think it's really listening, being empathetic, and if you can, provide resources for the next person and let them know like this is how I can help. So those things that I try to model now, because I know my time is so restricted with having kids and like I barely have time to do things, but I know that I can model or offer services in that way.
I love that so much. So big things I took away from that: listen more than you talk, and be empathetic and provide resources. I love that so much. Thank you. Um, and thank you so much for joining me, for having this chat. It's so fun to see your face again, and I wish you all of the best in everything that you're doing and all of your work. But will you let us know if people want to follow you? Where do they find you?
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I also wish all the same for you, and I'm going to be following
Uh,
along to see where your journey takes you as well.
thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and yeah, I'm on most socials, most platforms as Aventuras and ESL, and so that's the best place to find me, and my website's the same, aventurasenyesl.com. And yeah, I'm so happy when I get to connect with new people and new readers. And I also want to pay it forward if there's anyone listening and you are interested in writing a book or you're interested in the publishing field, and you need a starting place. I'm happy to share what I know. And if I don't know, I can point you in a direction. Um, but yeah, I would
I
love
love
to
that.
connect with other people as well.
Oh, thank you so much. That's the most wonderful thing, I think, for somebody who has, as some would say, made it, somebody who has made it in the publishing world, to then say, "Hey, I'm happy to put out a hand and pull you up as well." That's such a beautiful thing. So, thank you so much, and best of luck with everything. And I hope that we can cross paths. No, I know that we'll cross paths
Oh,
again
yes,
with
we will.
with, with other things that are going on. So thank you so much. And thanks for
Yes.
joining us.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for having me.